G'day everyone, a great big thanks for joining us and welcome to our podcast that's all about growing food's future together. I'm David Sivia and I run Feedback Organic, an exciting organisation that's dedicated to exploring local solutions to the complex global problem of food waste. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to the elders both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal Australia. We must always remember that under the concrete and asphalt, this land is, was and always will be traditional Aboriginal land. So I'm here today with my indefatigable friend Bec Bowie, a local icon in our Newcastle community. And aside from her many other noteworthy pursuits, a booming advocate of what our focus is today. G'day Bec.
G'day Dave.
In this episode we'll be chatting around Bec's experience operating one of Newcastle's most sustainable, circular and welcoming cafes, Estabar. We get the chance to learn how they operate within the food waste ecosystem, how they work as a team, why they do it, their key learnings and what the future holds for businesses on the front line of the food waste ecosystem for customers and their community. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here, Becco. Let's dive in. First, I'd say our audience would love to touch on how it is you've got to where you are and how the wondrous Estabar came about.
Okay, so Estabar got started in 2004, so it's almost 18 years old now. And at the time I was working in local government. I really wanted to be of service to my local community. I was just fresh out of university and I was really excited about that. 5 years down the track, I had a love interest who found this great spot on the beach and had this idea that we could open a cafe and kind of run a Barcelonian kind of experience because he lived in Barcelona. So for me, it was this beautiful opportunity to continue to serve because I was creating this space for local people to come together and for visitors to experience a bit of Newcastle culture and coastline. And for him, it was a real kind of business model kind of case. That's how Estabar came about. And we're still here because I just love it. And there's always something to make better, and we have this big vision of being a positive impact on in the future of food. So it's just never finished. There's always something to do, so we just keep trundling on. So
true. I never knew that. That's really interesting to hear the background of that. And 2004,
it was a while ago.
And it's a long time. Some people weren't even born who were kind of listening to
this. It's so true.
I imagine.
It's so true. But, beautifully, I've got to watch kids grow up, and some of them work for me now. It's lovely.
Yeah, and we were just touching that before this actual recording, just how interesting it is, the dynamic of the newer generation who are immersed in this kind of industry now and what they bring.
Yeah, 100%.
So there's a few different topics I'm just interested to touch on. Let's kick off just, I guess, your perspective. Why do you think food waste is a problem within Australia?
So obviously food waste is a massive problem because it's a waste of all the resources that went into preparing the food, which is incredibly taxing on our environment in the way that we typically prepare food in this day and age. And then there's the perspective of why it happens, like why people waste. In Estabar, from the get-go, we have a really tiny kitchen, so we really didn't have an opportunity to waste much because we really couldn't buy very much in. We really only waste when I go ahead and buy something because it looks exciting and interesting and I don't communicate properly with my cooks and it just doesn't get processed. Or the other time we waste is when we don't name things properly in the fridges. So I've been thinking about this, how this relates to other people, and I feel like it's that we buy more than we need, the 2-for-1 special. We've got big refrigerators so we can fill them right up, and then we're too busy to prepare all the food, but then also not disciplined enough to say, all I've got left is a bag of carrots and some corn and some potatoes and some toast. So today we're having bubble and squeak with the toast, We're not disciplined enough to work all the way through it, and perhaps we're also not skilled enough to go, okay, well, that's actually a sauerkraut. So except for the potato, don't put the potato in your sauerkraut. So just having the time, and it does take time to prepare and preserve food, but it also takes discipline and also valuing the food. So for me, it all comes down to, do I value my resources and do I recognise them as resources? And I feel like with food on a global scale, because Industrial Revolution made it also abundant, we can tend to not appreciate its value and not take care of it accordingly. So we buy too much, we don't prepare it, and we waste it.
I totally get that. I think you've actually just nailed the 3 types of food waste, and it's just kind of like spoilage, food prep waste, and plate waste as well. And it's like, where do you stop or curb that in the first place? And I think it might be even an advantage for you to have a smaller kitchen. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I do actually feel like it's an advantage to have a smaller kitchen because we work from lack in a way, and we can't get ahead of ourselves too often.
What do you think the best ways are to curb all those problems?
It's all in education. It's all in communication with your team. So right now, like I told you earlier, I'm training cooks up from scratch, which is actually really quite fantastic because we'll be cutting rhubarb together and I'll say, hey, the last 10% is profit. Because the last 10%, in my cafe anyway, is profit. And if you just chop that willy-nilly and throw more in the compost that needs to go in the compost, then you've just thrown away a couple of serves. And the other thing I always teach them is the spatula is the most important tool we have in the kitchen because we're going to take everything out of that bowl. I mean, you can tell them what to do, but you've got to tell them why to do it. And I always take it way back and dramatise a little bit. So, for example, in our kitchen, we don't have one of those big hose spray things that sprays down every plate, A, because it doesn't fit, and B, because I don't even let the guys run the water. Literally, when I see the water running and I see it, I see everything. Yeah. I'm like, hey, what's going on in there? Because it's very easy to just run the water and rinse this and rinse that and just pour litres and litres and litres down the drain. If you can imagine, in our cafe, like, I mean, we could fill a swimming pool, I'm absolutely certain of it, if we rinsed it with running water every time. So we have buckets in the sink that have got hot soapy water in them, and the guys are more than welcome to replace them and refresh them as much as they want, but you just can't run the water to rinse every plate. And right now, some of my people are saying to me, Bec, it won't stop raining, there's water everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, there's water everywhere, but we need to set down our practices for when there's not water everywhere. Yeah, we just need to be really mindful of all of our resources and value them.
I get that. Yeah, I think it comes back to your why, as you were saying, and like being ever vigilant of like the eagle eye, making sure that, well, it's to a degree, like obviously you don't want to be over the top with that, but it does take, especially when you're training new staff, provide a why and then absolutely provide, here, this is some guidance and I'm always watching. Do you have a way of whether defining or describing Estabar's ethos? Is there a way of like what you're bringing, to the cafe scene, the restaurant scene?
I've defined it many, many times over the years, but really it always comes down to just three basic things. One is I want to work with great people who are really kind of juiced up about their lives and doing great things and really showing up at work. So I want a team that really cares about one another, cares about our customers, and then I want to really be of service to my community. So I want legitimate, authentic interactions and experiences with our community. I want to really create a place where people can land and reconnect with themselves or one another. That is really important to me. And finally, I just want to be a part of the future of good food. So look at everything we do all the time and look for all of the opportunities to make them more impactful in promoting a future where we do have access to food that actually nourishes us and actually nourishes the environment.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear on the last couple of years of operation of me having breakfast there every now and then.
Yeah.
I think it's spot on. And the people who you employ, for sure, like you can pretty much become best friends with them. And I think that's pretty authentic from that point. With all of this kind of ethos within you and your operation, how do you keep your finger on the pulse of the circular economy or just, as you're connected to your suppliers, how are you keeping up to date?
So I do not read newspapers or anything, but I do have great relationships with people like yourself, and I run ideas past people like yourself and I get inspired. So I just recently did a permaculture course with Milkwood, and that really illuminated a lot of opportunities we had and really bedded down a lot of the things that we do already. So I recently also read a book called Toxic about the fish farming practice in Tasmania. So I tend to take very pointed deep dives in trying to understand issues that relate to my business. So I do not have a concern with what's going on in other people's businesses necessarily. I really try not to look at what other cafes are doing. I really just try and stay focused on what we're doing and how we can do it better, and that is all I have headspace for.
Yeah, and deep diving, as you say, absolutely an angle. It's obviously been successful so far.
I think you really got to know what you're about. I'm not going to do the things that the broader community seems to just want because that's what's trending right now. I have no interest in that, and I can't do it. So I think of it as my art. And so I'm going to put things on the plate or on the table. I'm going to make things available to you that I think have a lot of value. And if you don't like them, that is so fine, because there'll be 5 other cafes in walking distance that will potentially do something like that for you. I feel like when you operate like that, then you really connect with customers on a deeper level because you start to be very values-based and they can really relate to that. When I was thinking about these questions, Dave, I was remembering Avatar with the blue guys. So you remember that moment where the blue guy, the main blue guy, had to like climb up that really dangerous mountain and jump on the dragon and connect his hair to the dragon's hair, right? This is what I think is what you're doing in business, is that you are climbing up this mountain of congruency. You are constantly trying to build a business that is very authentic and relatable and trustworthy. And then when you get to the top, when you're there, there's some customers there, and it's in that moment that you need to pounce on them and try and connect with their values. You know, we can get very caught up in all the social media and all the stuff out here, but really I think when customers are in your space, that's why your team has to be totally engaged and totally educated so that they can take that moment to go, oh, you like those eggs? Okay, cool. So Sarah from Eccleston, she has these great values and this is a beautiful story. And honestly, there's something really primal about that connection with food that really lights people up. And it speaks to, I'm sure, some kind of forgotten part of their brain that wants to go back there. They want to get more of that food that is totally, really actually nourishing.
Yeah, it's the whole package, as you're saying. It's into the customer experience. Absolutely. Yeah. I love the Avatar reference. Right. That's beautiful. The tendrils.
The tendrils.
That was really on point. I was going to ask as well, just on that topic of operating Estabar, what are some of the hardest lessons you've learned?
I've learned stacks of stuff, and I still learn stacks of stuff all the time, and that's one of the things maybe why I'll never be able to finish this business, because potentially I'll never actually nail the issues, you know, because it is such a growth experience to have a business, but also to be responsible for a team of 20 people and then be responsible for a broader community of, you know, hundreds and thousands of people. So you really illuminate your personal kind of nuances. And I guess one of the things that I really learnt is that you can't mother everybody. You really shouldn't do that. And you really have to be brave enough to have really clear, authentic conversations with everybody. So for a long time in hospitality, I thought it was my job to make everybody really happy, and I would just totally do whatever it took. And now I say to people, like a lady the other day said, really? $11 for 2 coffees? And I said, yeah. So let's talk about that. We use single source milk from a really wonderful family dairy in Dubbo, and they are part of the future of food that I want to be involved in. We worked with single origin roasters who have a very strong commitment to the future of coffee and great relationships with coffee farmers and so on. I pay all my staff properly. Yeah, that's what coffee costs now.
Legitimately, that's absolutely.
And these are the conversations I'm having with people, and my team and I are riled up about this because this is their future. The agriculture, the way that we grow food, is impacting the environment, which is impacting their future. And so we can't expect everything to be cheap anymore. And this act of service, like this working in hospitality where you're taking care of people, is a big job. It's not easy, and I feel like it needs to be valued more. And I told that lady that.
You're the best. And that's what everyone absolutely loves about you, Becca. Like, you're absolutely authentic. And the way you're saying you're leading, in the sense of, like, no longer flimsy on the way you kind of deliver your message of, hey, we need to learn from this. I think that's a great leadership of authenticity and giving direct feedback. I think that's really important. I think we all appreciate that. One question then is, so you can imagine someone who's listening to this, looking at maybe starting their own little cafe. Is there anything you'd think you'd just do differently? If you did start again, is there anything you'd do it a different way and maybe pass on some advice to those people?
I mean, of course, there would be a mozza of things that I would do differently, but I guess my only advice would be just to really know what you are about and what you want to bring to the space and what you're going to offer your customers. It is wise to find out whether that is of interest to them. And I did walk down Derby Street with a clipboard 18 years ago and ask people what they liked about going to a cafe. So you do have to actually meet a need, but then bring your whole self to that and make your decisions values-based decisions. Please try not to get distracted by all the cool things that other people are doing. You need to stay your course so that your customers can connect their hairpiece to your hairpiece and you can really relate to one another. And that's how you build these long relationships where what you do is part of their lifestyle and it really meets some deeper needs other than just, you need a caffeine hit and somewhere to sit for 20 minutes. So I think that's a values-based interaction.
Yeah, I'm starting to appreciate that more as well. It's a hub, like it's places for people to go to, connect a community there, which is linked to that. And hence why so many times, we've done events and things at Estabar as well. Yeah. And I think that's important, and hence really you're an advocate for all of this progress on that front. That takeaway of quite literally walking down Derby Street with a clipboard, I would be taking that on board. So this podcast is trying to connect the dots of community, industry and government relationships and perspectives. I'm keen to hear your perspective on how we can connect the people in our community, e.g. kind of your customers, with the hospitality industry, but also keep them connected to businesses who are leading by example. So the questions I have really is how can customers and hospitality businesses form a better bond to really create a mutual relationship?
Every time we choose to spend our money or our time in a place, it's a vote for that place's values. If we, as a community, want to vote for a sustainable future for food and a lovely planet to live on, then we need to be really mindful about all the ways that we either support that outcome or the status quo. I feel like we need to be very carefully and authentically communicating about how we deliver on those sustainable, thoughtful objectives. And again, I think that a lot of that needs to happen in situ, in face-to-face, in communication, and so that you can really have the trust in it. Because sometimes when we're just putting pretty pictures on Facebook and what have you, that's easy to do. Actually living it is hard to do. I can give you a little tiny example. So when I read that book, Toxic, by Richard Flanagan, and found out what was happening in Tasmania, I was buying Tassie salmon because my research, like 18 years ago, Tassie salmon was a great choice. And my other choice was to buy it from across the other side of the world, from Scandinavia, and it was much cheaper. But I didn't do that because of food miles, and I wanted to have community, so I wanted to support this local business. And then I read this book and found out that it's just an absolute disaster. There's just not enough water in the bays or moving to support fish farming. And so we switched from that company to working with a farmer in New Zealand who produces off the Milborough Sound. And in big open water, the issues don't exist, but our price went from $30 a kilo to $80 a kilo. And so that happens. When you're making values-based decisions, they are sometimes going to be very costly. And they are always going to be costly for all of us at all levels. So if you're a person doing your shopping, it might cost you more time to go to a different, I hate to say supermarket, because you really probably want to be going to a farmer's market or do your backyard or your neighbour's backyard, but whatever you can do, it's going to cost you more money and more time to choose the Australian grown produce, the produce that's grown thoughtfully, the sustainable stuff. It's going to cost you more, but people make those decisions when they believe in the outcome.
It's such a complex system. Not everyone's going to be able to, pay more, etc. You just got to keep reiterating that story. And I think you've just provided a really good boots on the ground example. Because in reading Richard Flanagan's book, and then you were actually in the situation to actually do something about it, and you did. Full credit to you for doing that. And I think it's a testimony to you and how you operate. I'm going to ask you a really interesting question. You started touching on the future of food and potentially food waste as well. I love this sentence. Let's look into the food waste crystal ball. And I thought that's sort of funny even thought to even think about. What do you think the food waste ecosystem will look like in 10 years in your context?
I guess when I think about that, I feel like in 10 years' time, people are going to be looking at food waste and going, oh my God, that's gold in that bin. And you're not having it. I'm not going to pay you to take that away. I'm going to take that to my plot and I'm going to put that in my compost bin. I'm going to convert it into a garden that's going to grow things for my cafe. And I feel like that's what could happen in people's backyards everywhere too. It's a resource. It's a really nutrient-dense, valuable resource that we're discarding. And if we could just have more knowledge and better systems or easier systems to capture it and utilise it, I think that would be really exciting and really possible. I think you're exactly right. There's what models are out there to actually make that happen. I'm pretty sure that I have an image of you wheeling one of our food waste bins back to your home for something similar of that scenario, which is spot on. What do you think will be outrageous in 10 years? As in 15, 20 years ago when people were able to kind of smoke inside? Is there anything wild? You just think is food waste even a thing? I have a proper answer here, but I think what I'm going to tell you is that I think human manure is going to be a big deal in the future, because I think that, again, another nutrient-dense resource that we could capture and utilise on site.
In our homes?
In our homes, yeah.
Not just the compost. I think it'll be a complex thing for sure. But you're right. They're all resources, exactly. And you just wonder what's not going to be outrageous. And
also, we have all of these kind of systems where resources don't fit, where things get lost and that becomes waste. So it's like that circular economy of we produce it, what are we going to do with it? Rather than we produce it and we're just going to flick it off to nowhere, to somewhere where it becomes a bigger problem, where it really is an opportunity. So that's what I think could be exciting.
There's so many opportunities, and I think you're right. It's like, what models can people come up with that are innovative? Also then working in with our economy that's somewhat making it commercial to a degree that there is actually a return for it. It's an interesting perspective. So I'm going to ask you one last question. Let's imagine for a moment that you could put a message on a giant billboard that would reach out to all of New South Wales. What would you put on it? A word, a saying, a picture, an emoji, an image. What would you think?
I was thinking I would write, eat right for your climate type.
Super cool.
Right?
Is that even a hashtag yet?
No, somebody get on that. Eat right for your blood type. I was thinking, and it has so many layers too, because if you eat right for your climate type, all of our homes are a little microclimate. We've got tomatoes and cucumbers growing in an upstairs cupboard, basically, that's got a big window in it, and stuff in the backyard and so on. So if you eat right for your climate type, then you're eating right what's in your immediate climate, but then in your locality, what can grow in your locality, and then broader, in your country. So if you're eating right for your climate type, just as a human on Earth, if you're eating right for your climate type, you're not getting salmon from Scandinavia, because that's not right for the climate to ship a fish, however many thousands of miles that is, over to your plate. Yeah, fundamentally, I think I would write "eat right" for your climate type.
I just wrote that down because I think it's actually really worthwhile. Thank you for that amazing insight. Let's try and get that on a billboard.
Yeah, let's get on it.
But Becca, I think we're done. It was absolutely refreshing to hear your perspective and obviously your insight and your experience and why you exist. And I think everyone else is pretty grateful for that.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me along.
That's no problems. Estabar is a fantastic cafe. I would recommend anyone supporting that in any way possible. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for listening to this episode in a podcast series about the food waste ecosystem in New South Wales and Newcastle. The series highlights food waste avoidance champions at a government, business and community level. To read the show notes for our podcast, go to feedbackorganic.com.au/blog. The Food Waste Ecosystem podcast series is supported through the EPA's Love Food, Hate Waste program. Feedback Organic scales inclusive and regenerative community solutions to Australia's urban food system by training regenerative urban farmers that reconnect us with land, redirect our food waste into growing healthy food, and create circular food systems. To find out more about the work that Feedback Organic does to find local solutions to the complex global problem of food waste, visit our website feedbackorganic.com.au or follow us on Instagram or Facebook. Search Feedback Loop in your favourite podcast streaming app and subscribe today.